Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Gale Force Winds. I'm Alan Dale, and with me, as always, is my good friend, my buddy from the East End of St. John's, Newfoundland, Jerry Carew. How are you, Jerry?
I'm doing well, and I am not going to talk about the weather today. We've been getting some really good feedback from a lot of people that don't focus on too much of ourselves, and I'm going to do my best. I will say that, as I always say, I'm excited about our guests. Met Gina back in the 80s, and what I love about what we're doing, Alan, to be honest with you, is being able to rekindle old friendships. 30 years ago, I had no idea that Gina had this entrepreneurial side to her, and I look forward to catching up.
Absolutely, Jerry. And it really is exciting. And you're right. We've got to practice active listening. We're talking too much these days. People aren't tuning in to hear about Jerry and Al. They're tuning in to hear about our guests. Not so long ago, the Canadian government embarked on this fantastic journey called the National Ship Strategy, the Canadian Ship Strategy that was going to see industry come alive and creativity and innovation get sparked as we started to build new platforms for really many of the government agencies, be it the Coast Guard, the Canadian Navy, and the like. It was really an exciting time back in 2012. And Genoa Design at that time was really hovering around a near-death experience. But in walks Gina Pecore, and we're certainly excited to hear about Gina Pecore and Genoa Design. Gina, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Thanks, guys. It's really nice to reconnect in this surprising way and to catch up remotely, but it certainly feels very much in person. I am an entrepreneur, I guess. Didn't know that, as you said, Jerry, 30 years ago. And circumstances kind of, I guess, they bring out what we hope is the best in ourselves. So I come from a background that began with the Canadian Navy. I was a reservist, which is where we first met. And from there, I did sign a full-time contract with the Canadian Navy, and I was editor of the Navy's newspaper for a few years. Had all kinds of great adventures, got to do things with the Admiral of the Fleet at the time, traveled where he traveled, and really had some wonderful times on the high seas. And got out, came back to Newfoundland, worked in several positions, doing public relations and communications and so on, and settled down with my family, with my husband, and started this company called Genoa Design. And I didn't have a huge role to play in the early years with that business. I was kind of the backroom kitchen table advisor until 2012. And that's where I kind of parked my career at the time, which I had started several businesses and was a consultant and a trainer, and I was ready to sink my teeth into something. And it turns out that the thing I needed to sink my teeth into was something I had already been involved with behind the scenes for several years.
Okay, so that's a neat. That's a neat start to the whole thing. So, what sparked that conversation? There you are in 2012. At what point you're sitting at the table and you realize, okay, I'm gonna focus on this. What sparked that for you?
Desperate need, I think, is the easy answer to that. So it's 2012, and as I said, desperate need came along, which is always the start of any good entrepreneurial journey. I had the latest business venture of mine was I was just wrapping it up. It didn't work out. It was a wonderful idea, but it didn't really make me any money. So I folded the business. And at the same time, Genoa had just really barely come out of the 2008 to 2011 recession, global recession, and had been really quite damaged and diminished during that period of time. And along comes this thing called the Canadian National Shipbuilding Strategy, and it was a light at the end of the tunnel for Genoa. It was a reason to hang on and to rebuild. And so Len and I just looked at each other and said, well, is it time to put our eggs in one basket here and join up our skills? And so we needed to recover. We needed an income for our family, and it seemed like a really good time to start working together.
What was it about that strategy that really tweaked you? What was it about that you saw a glimmer of hope? Because sometimes these big government programs can be a little clunky to kind of get your head around. What was it in there that you saw the future for you guys?
Well, I guess, the biggest thing was that we had been named in the bid package for one of the winning proponents. There were two winning shipyards at the time. And so that was certainly hope enough. But, I think there were other reasons as well. Genoa had never really done any business in Canada. And that was quite a hard thing for us to deal with. We were hiring people who were trained up in Newfoundland and Labrador primarily, and we were exporting everything south of the border. And that was good. It was certainly a good pipeline of revenue for the business, but it was tough to see our talent not really contributing a whole lot to Canadian shipbuilding or ship management. And so it was very, very exciting to have that program come along and know that for the first time in the company's history, we were going to be able to work here in Canada. And I guess closely linked to that is our naval background. We were both in the Canadian Navy, and I served at a time when women were first going to sea, when we were bringing on a whole new fleet of frigates. It was a very exciting time for Canada. The destroyer fleet was going into retirement. And so in 2012, we saw the next stage of that. We saw a 25 years, which was a very dry period in Canadian shipbuilding. And it was so exciting to see that that was coming back and that we had a chance to be part of it.
Sorry, Al, I got to jump in before. To me, we're jumping quickly ahead, and I just want to back up just a little bit, because so at one point in your life, your both businesses are teetering. Yeah. I think that is absolutely fascinating to me as to how you don't go down a negative rabbit hole, Gina. How did you lift yourselves up? Just touch on that, and then we'll move on.
A friend of mine once said to me, "How do you live like this?" And I get it now when I look back on it, but kind of puzzled me at the time, because I guess as an entrepreneur, you sort of always look at the control of your own destiny, even though it might be not great, is better than no control. And that particular friend was working in government, and which always felt like a really scary proposition to me, which is probably why I chose to not stick with the Canadian Navy. So, it was tough. The bank account was empty. The credit cards were racked up, because that's what you do. But when you have a belief as an entrepreneur, you kind of stick to that belief, because hope is everything. And, it's the future ambition that will always fuel you. So even though it was pretty tough, teetering on, my business was closed up. I was in debt over it. It was just, I had to move on. But this was a pretty major, exciting opportunity, and I think we were both able to really put our shoulders to that wheel and feel happy about it.
Yeah, I love the spirit of the entrepreneur. Eh? You can see it all play out in front of you. That's fantastic. There's one thing I wanted to pick up there, Gina, that you mentioned, that you were doing great business south of the border and everywhere else but Canada, and you had a passion to kind of bring this talent, to bring a solution to Canada. That seems to be a recurring theme in a lot of companies in Canada, that they seem to have great success everywhere else except in their own backyard. Could you speak to that?
Yeah, it's oh, wow, that's a really big topic, Alan. I think sometimes we suffer from a lack of a vision, or we defer to other countries or other industry players to be smarter than we are, to have more chances, more possibilities. And, I think there's always that as a small Canadian business, that hope, that drive and desire to bring it home. And one of the things that, and perhaps was part of the excitement of participating in the National Shipbuilding Strategy, is that Canada laid out a very clear set of rules for the companies that were going to come into the country and operate. And they were around supporting Canadian enterprises and using this program to lift us up, to build our capability, enable us to grow and to export. And I have to give government credit at the time. They honored that. They really gathered themselves around companies like Genoa and said, they pushed us forward in the game and said, work with this company. It's important that we see them grow. And we've been a bit of a flag bearer for the Canadian content side of the Canadian SME story for shipbuilding in Canada. We've grown. We've gone from 18 people to 250. So I think we've been able to demonstrate that this does work.
100%, right? And those are 250 people that are contributing to the economy. They're adding to to the industry in technology, but also adding to their communities that they live in. Are most of your staff, Gina, in Newfoundland, or are they spread out?
Most of them are here. Yep, for sure. We do have a sizable team operating from Vancouver, which is where our major customer is. We have customers in the US as well and have operated elsewhere across Canada, but our primary customers out there. So fairly big team there. And we do have a small contingent in the US that we are looking to grow in the coming months.
So Gina, 18 to 250.
Yeah.
That sounds stressful to me. So tell me about that. Now, how do you grow like that? And what are the core kind of values? What's the culture for the team? What's keeping them with Genoa Design?
Oh, wow. That's another, you're good at the big questions. I think so. Culture is really important to us. And it's not an easy thing to answer. How do you build culture, right? Mm-hmm. So one of the things that we did start with was and it's one of the earliest things we did back when we were kind of recovering the company. We had to say, all right, how do we pay off our debt? How do we get the right equipment and systems into the business to deliver on this big opportunity? How do we get the right people? And there were a couple of things we did very early on that have served us incredibly well. And one of them was the introduction of an employee share ownership program. And we had a half a dozen very, very key employees in 2012, fairly senior designers, and we didn't want them going anywhere. So we brought them into the business as owners, and they invested their own cash, and I guess we helped them to see that there could be a very good vision, and they stayed with us. And in fact, all of them are still with the company and part of what is now an expanded employee share ownership program. But that ownership thinking has been very important. And to do that, you need to make sure that you involve your people in decision making, that they are well informed every step of the way. So we do communication. Unlike most companies that I'm familiar with, we have a very open environment. The second thing we did was really got busy with establishing a set of core values that we could stick on the wall, but we could also live it day to day. And there's 15 words that make up our core values, and they are alive in this business every day. And they're not just words that create happy moments, but they help us to make tough decisions. Mm-hmm. So there have been times when we've had to make a hard decision. Sometimes it's about, making a decision to exit an employee, which is never easy, or to bid on a job, or there's a whole spectrum of decisions that have to be made. And doing it through the lens of your values is very, very helpful. So those two things, the employee share ownership and those values, have really been the underpinning of how we run culture here at Genoa.
Yeah, it's one thing to have a vision. It's another thing to show people where they fit into that vision. And obviously you have a strong communication background, because that is a real unique talent. I listened to some of the clips there on Genoa on your website. And one thing that really stood out, there's a lot of information floating around there, but one thing that really stood out there, one of the staff members say, "I feel important when I work here." And that speaks volumes. So I think that's fantastic to kind of make everybody feel kind of part of the team. I'm always fascinated at the talent of the people in Newfoundland. I'm always fascinated by their creativity, their innovativeness, their ability to adapt, their flexibility. Tell me about that in your staff.
You are so right about that, and I always tell our team that we've got the best team in the business, and I fully believe that. And it's not that they are more skilled, technically skilled. I could go elsewhere and find people who maybe are a bit more skilled, maybe they're faster at what they do,
Mhm.
but it's really about the whole package, isn't it? And people they expect to work hard. They expect to be treated well. They expect to be able to bring their whole selves to the job. They expect to have a sense of humor. They expect to contribute to and receive kindness. They expect a definition of a work family. And, when we go elsewhere, my leadership team now, we've often noticed that people in other businesses that we deal with, they're great people, but there's some little something that is often missing, and it feels like work is just work.
Mhm.
And I just go and I do that. And it is for here. There's no expectation that you live and breathe your work. Having balance in your life is actually one of our values, that you take care of yourself. But that if something happens, people really care about who you are outside of work as well. And I just think it's the whole package of what we bring. I don't think it's unique to Newfoundland and Labrador, but I think it's abundant in Newfoundland and Labrador.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. Not unique,
Yeah.
but abundant. Now that leadership style that you describe, that culture that you describe, it rings a lot like the Navy, right? I mean, the Navy, they were there to pick you up when you fell. There was a family there was a culture there, and you were expected to perform for sure. But you knew that if you had an off day, they were going to be there to help you along, right? And it sounds like a little bit of that trickled into Genoa Design for sure.
Yeah, for sure. And over the years, as we've grown, and you did mention, scaling up with that many people it can be stressful, it can be daunting. And there have been a lot of fear points that have been expressed by our staff, when we first made that first leap from 20 to 50, and people said, that's it, it's not going to be the same here anymore. It's going to be very different. And it was different, but it was good. And then we went from 50 to 100, and people said, oh my God, it's going to be, that's it, the arse is out of her kind of thing, it's not going to be the same. And it wasn't the same, but it was still good. And we've reached the point that we are today, and now we're working from home in a pandemic, but there's still that vibe of Genoa. It's still, you can still feel that connection in the company, which makes me optimistic and not fearful that we can get to 500 and keep that alive.
Wow. Tell me about the pivot in the pandemic. I mean, that's a lot of people to kind of manage and keep all oars in the water. And with a big customer who expects results and stuff. Tell me about the pivot in the pandemic. How you got people engaged?
Yeah. So we've had a few laughs about two pearls of wisdom that I had back in February of 2020. And the first one was an email that I wrote from a flight from the seat of an airplane, of an Air Canada flight, on my way back from New Orleans, visiting a customer. And I wrote an email to my leadership team and said, this COVID thing, this coronavirus, I didn't even call it COVID, this coronavirus thing, I think we should just kind of look into that, because I'm sure it won't come to anything, but maybe we should just pay some attention. So we've laughed about that a little bit since then, and how big that turned out to be. The other little nugget of wisdom, non-wisdom, was when the realization was happening that we were going to have to find a way to work from home. I famously said, there's absolutely no way that this company can work from home. It's fine for others, but it's not going to work for us, because we manage data that is so big. There's no way that we can transmit that over the wires. And within about a week, our IT team had us working from home, the entire company, and we figured it out. And I think it maybe would have been, like a lot of other businesses, another 5 years before we would have really given that the effort that it needed. The technology was there. It just needed that imperative to go and make it work. And it happened. So, what a surprise.
Yeah, it's funny. I've learned not to say no way in the middle. There's no way something will happen, because through the pandemic, a lot of things have happened that I never thought were possible. In your
Yeah.
culture, it sounds like your team is very close, so there's no doubt. Are you finding it difficult, the social side, not connecting with them every day and seeing them every day?
Yeah. I think there's no way to, I guess, put to sugarcoat that. It is hard. It's very hard. And even so, we have a good number of our team members back. We've have lots of protocols in the business. So, the parking lot is getting fuller now, and as restrictions are easing up, but we're behind masks. We are still, even though we're sitting here, still largely in an online environment, and it's tough. It's really, really tough. It changes everything, and we can't have team builders. We can't socialize. So I think we're doing the very best that we possibly can, like everybody else. But the day can't come soon enough when we can just hang out. And I think it's going to be an adjustment, honestly. We're not used to being in close quarters anymore. So there was an adjustment going in, and there's going to be one coming out.
Do you think Genoa Design will look much different?
Yeah, good question. Huh?
Yeah. So, I've thought, and probably, dropped a few pearls of wisdom, non-wisdom on this subject as well, but I'm not sure that I really buy the idea that we're not going to need as much real estate for our businesses, that we'll keep working from home, because the reality is that I think as employers, we have gained a level of trust that was not there about our teams working from home. I think there was a trust, kind of that suspicion of, if people are home, what's to stop them doing the laundry or, tending the garden when when they're supposed to be at work. And we've all gotten over ourselves on that. People can work from home, and we have to trust them, and they've proven, people globally have proven that they're very reliable in working from home. But it's lonely. The lack of connection is felt. I think people need to socialize with their work colleagues, but how they do so might be different. So instead of having a designated office, there may be more open team spaces. There may be more rotations through the office, the plant, or the facility, with more capability to work from home, which is, honestly, it has so many benefits. If you're raising a family, if you are fighting off an illness, the ability to just stay home for the day or for the week can be extremely helpful. And if your well-being is high, then your productivity at work is also high. So I think there's a shift in attitude, but I'm not sure that I see a work from home culture really dominating the workplace. And you can show me this podcast in a year when I'm proven to be completely wrong, but that's how I feel right now.
Okay. Well, it's interesting. I watched an interview on Bloomberg, and one of the leaders of that organization said that the water cooler conversation is not happening anymore. Do you think that any of your projects were slowed down because that wasn't happening at all?
In a word, yes. All of our projects were considered to be mission critical. So we have, I think it was through the course of the past 12 months, 5 major projects, and all of them are new vessels for the US or Canadian governments. And so we had to keep working, and we needed that. There was no option to just stay home. We had to keep going, and I think that was a real blessing for our business. So where was I going with that? What was your question again?
Well, I was just talking about the water cooler, and I watched an interview. Yeah, so projects and not having that interaction in person.
Yes, exactly. So did it slow it down? And yes, it did, because, you don't have, and I think we've all felt it. So we had to keep going, but it was harder to keep going. A little bit was pushing information over the internet. There was a little bit of that, but there was a big piece of that kind of peer-to-peer mentoring and guidance that will happen in an environment such as ours, where everybody they are interdependent. They need each other in order to. I will make some progress on my side of the ship as soon as you make progress on yours, and my question about how to depends on your answer. And so when you can look at each other and do that and be in the same space, things move faster. I do believe that Genoa is representative of most businesses in that we did our very best. I think we minimized the impact as much as we possibly could, but I would challenge anybody to say that there was no impact. I think that was an impossible situation.
Yeah. Of course. Gina, we've talked a lot about the culture and a lot about the team, and of course, no company will be successful without all of that. But no company will be successful without some really interesting product as well. What exactly does Genoa Design do?
Right. Yeah. Great question. So we build the ship first, and what that means is we detail a ship digitally. We build a 3D model, a highly detailed, integrated 3D product model that is used. Then information is extracted for the purposes of construction. But we're on a technology journey, and the digital vessel is becoming more and more robust with every program that we do. What started out 10, 15 years ago as basic structural and piping system elements is now a fully detailed and integrated model that is also highly visualized so that you can bring more people into that model for purposes of not just construction, but operations and training and decision making and procurement and planning and so on. It's a rapidly developing arena that we work in.
Wow. So I understand that your team is a lot from Newfoundland and other places. Where are they getting the education into this field? Because this is an emerging area. Where do they come from? Where do they study to get this?
Yeah, so we always hire people from the Marine Institute at Memorial University, which of course is right here in Newfoundland. And they came out of school with a 3-year diploma, engineering diploma in generally marine systems or structural naval architecture design. But what's interesting is that we grew kind of beyond the pace the Marine Institute's ability to provide new graduates. And we called a lot of people home who were working elsewhere in the world, but we also had to look more broadly, and we established a Genoa Academy. And one of the primary reasons for doing so, it's since really built a lot of strength in upskilling our employees. But the initial reason for establishing the academy was to be able to broaden our recruitment pool and look at other civil engineering programs and mechanical engineering, and graduates out of the College of the North Atlantic and graduates out of Memorial's engineering programs, graduates worldwide from different schools, bring them through our Genoa Academy, give them some training in ships, put them on the shop floor to go to work and learn to become shipbuilding designers as well. So it's, it all started with the Marine Institute. We still are a major recruiter of programs at MI, but we've kind of looked much more beyond that. You need an engineering technology skill set, and from there, we can help you to learn ships, no problem.
Right.
Is Genoa Academy now a stream of revenue for you, or is it just to feed your internal?
It's not a stream of revenue. We've often thought about that because as the shipbuilding industry grows in Canada, in Canada alone, the need for talent is, well, it's outstripping supply. But we haven't landed there yet. Currently, it meets the needs of our internal needs.
So you're staying true to your core values.
Yeah.
And we're staying true to our core, honestly, because if you get into the business of selling education, that's a different business model. It's not that we can't play there, but it's different.
Have the academic institutions responded to your needs as time goes on?
Not as well as we would like them to, no. Right. So, I think this is another I guess I don't know if it's a lesson for Canada. I'm not really sure how to shape it, but when you see trends in an industry or a demand that's coming, educational institutions, and I think when we look at software development, for example, or coding here in Newfoundland and Labrador, we haven't really been as progressive as we could be in that area. Things are changing now and they're catching up. But if we use the national shipbuilding strategy in Canada as an example, and which is matched in the the US market is also very rich in shipbuilding work right now. Our education institutions have not increased their supply of people to match. So it's an opportunity.
It's 100% an opportunity. And I find we've had a number of conversations with people in industry and government and academia, Jerry and I, and it's best when all three components are working together. They're all gears in the machine. And it happens in some sectors and it seems to work, but sometimes one might be out of sync with the other and it takes a little bit of time to catch up. But it's best when they all work together. Gina, it's exciting times in the shipbuilding world in Canada and I would say globally. There's many countries that are down this path of procurement and designing and building new ships. I'd like to focus specifically on Canada, though. Global pandemic, a lot of money spent to keep the economy moving had to be spent. But now we may well be facing a reckoning to say, okay, what programs move forward and what don't? Where do you see the shipbuilding program in Canada in the next 5 to 10 years?
Well, I see it continuing to have a large need for new ships. Canada's Navy and Coast Guard are without a sufficient fleet, and Canada has a lot of work to do to fill the demand there, to beef up those fleets. And those are large vessels, and they are support vessels down to smaller working vessels. There's a lot of need across Canada. The question will be, and it currently is making its way around, would it be cheaper to just buy those ships elsewhere? So to go to another country and say, we'll take that model, please, and not pursue shipbuilding in Canada. And the reality is that this is the kind of industry that's very expensive to get off the ground. And I mentioned earlier that the shipbuilding industry in Canada was dormant, really since the last major procurement of frigates for the Canadian Navy happened. There haven't been new major ships being built, and so the smaller players, they also disappear because if you don't have the big demand driving it, and so rebuilding that industry has been a lot of work, and it's come under a lot of fire, but we've done it, and that rebuilding it's not complete, but it certainly is largely complete. You've got your major shipyards ready to go. You've got your first vessels in the water, and you have a Canadian supply chain that has matured and is ready to serve. So the question to our government leaders is, are you going to let that go now? Because the investment is made, and it may be tempting to start to compare costs and perceive that there's going to be a cost reduction. But I think that's a really important analysis for Canada to do, and to recognize the value of the investment and how it affects so many individuals and companies and programs and geographic regions and so on across the country. We're ready to go now. We're just hitting our stride. We need to keep it up because, as I said, there's certainly the demand to do so.
Yeah, 100%. And the spin-offs into the smaller companies and the technologies that are being created are very exportable around the globe afterwards. So it's a great strategy, and we're in the throes of the strategy. You're absolutely right. Now is not the time to back away. I find shipbuilding in Canada is like a little bit of a sine wave. It's up and down, up and down. They just let it go. And But hopefully this time we get it right and we continue down the path and we continue replenishing the fleet. It certainly is an exciting time. Can you imagine being a young person embarking on that journey right now with all of those new ships in front of you? It's got to be an exciting time. And you're a big part of that, Gina. You're a big part of creating that.
Well, and it is, Alan, it's so exciting. I mean, the idea of new ships going in the water is, it's thrilling to me. But the technology side is also, it's super interesting. So this industry, shipbuilding, ship management, ship design, ship operation, it's highly evolving. The same as industries globally are, how we manage our data, our information, our digital assets is a really exciting realm. And when you talk about something as big with a long lifespan, some of the ships that Canada has in the water are exceeding 50 years old. That is a long lifespan for a digital asset. And so the technology revolution that's happening is a super exciting part of all of this. And Genoa right now is in the process of looking at the next 10, 20 years of the business, but looking at how we need to disrupt how we even participate in all of that. And that gets me even more excited than new ships going in the water.
Yeah, I noticed on your website, one line that you use is never stand still. It's like that constant innovation, right? That constant wanting to create something new and be disruptive. And that's fantastic. So Gina, we thank you very much for the discussion. It's really interesting to see a company in the middle of all of this, thriving through it all. And it's not without its challenges. The shipbuilding world is a complicated world, yet you're in the middle of it. You had a bit of a valley. You had a staff of 18, and here you are coming out the other end, growing with sights on really big numbers. This is a fantastic thing. We always ask our guests to leave the audience with a small piece of advice. What would that be? Now, you've started businesses. Some of them were successful. Some of them you've had challenges with. You're in the middle of one that's thriving now, and you're able to manage all of this. What is that little takeaway that you would leave the audience with?
I meant to think about this beforehand and I didn't. So I'm going to go with what's coming to mind for me right now. And maybe it's kind of a thread of what we've talked about here. I think take the risk, know what is the least, what is the lowest bar that you can tolerate if the risk fails. And if you can accept that, then make the leap, go ahead and go for it, because you'll always find a way to pick yourself up and be even better. And I think if we can find a way to operate with a little less fear, a little more kind of future ambition, and a little bit bigger of a risk appetite, the rewards can be really great and really exciting. So I think, find a way to take the risk.
That's excellent. Jerry, your thoughts on that?
All I can say is two entrepreneurs with the audacity to get into shipbuilding is inspiring. And you said something very early on in this conversation, Gina. Hope is everything. That four-letter word, hope, is one of the most inspiring words that I personally have ever encountered. And you've brought me back to that word again today. Thank you.
My pleasure. It was great to be here with you guys. This was a lot of fun.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, what another wonderful episode of Gale Force Winds with Gina Pecore. If you go on Genoa Design website, you're going to read words like put people first. You're going to read things like create lasting relationships, make a difference, own it, live well, never stand still. Well, there's no doubt in my mind, Gina is doing all of those things. And Gina, we want to thank you very much for being a part of this conversation. We want to thank you very much for what you're doing for Canada in providing world-class ships. And you're a big part of that. Make no mistake about it. That's important to our country, and we really do appreciate it. And thank you for your service in the Navy beforehand. That's fantastic too. And that's clearly trickled its way into this wonderful company. If I could leave the audience with one small thing, and that is The world needs more Gina Pecore. Thank you very much, Gina.
Thank you, guys.
Two friends, Alan Dale and Jerry Carew, who grew up just a few streets apart in St. John's East End, have been separated by Canada's geography for 3 decades. They came together virtually during the pandemic to chat about like-minded interests. Alan lives in PEI and Jerry in Newfoundland. Thriving in remoteness has been a common theme for both of them during the pandemic. Gale Force Wins, the podcast is the result.
Thank you for tuning in to Gale Force Wins. That's Gale Force Wins, WINS.com.